Alright guys, so this is the first guy to actually send me a P sheet over of some epoxy primer that he likes to use. And this is the sheet that tells you what this product will go over the top of. Now this is the name of the product. Never used it, never heard of it. It seems to be a European company. It does seem to be an automotive coating. However, this is their sheet. This is their technical data sheet. And here is their descriptions of substrates. Now substrate is the surface which you're putting the product over, okay? Substrate would be aluminum, steel, fiberglass, OEM paint surface, epoxy primer. That would be considered a substrate. So if you look at the substrates that this is approved to go over, it doesn't say bare metal anywhere. Old paint coatings, polyester, acrylic, and epoxy primers, but it doesn't say that it goes over bare steel anywhere. I've read the whole thing and it doesn't say that it's for bare metal. So they tell you the procedures to go over OEM. Matte and degrease, that means sand. That means put a tooth on it because it's not a chemical bond, it's a mechanical bond like every epoxy out there. And that's why they fail, guys. So there's some very interesting comments on that last video. I know it's titled Bad Head, but you should go check that video out. And I invited people to put their sheets up. You know, if you're using an epoxy primer and it says it'll go over bare steel, put your sheet up there and let me see it. I'm going to dig the manual out here. I'm getting ready to prime this Honda, and we're going to do it basically by the book. I'm going to show you matrix procedure and step by step in the book on how to use the epoxy primer. And when I'm using the matrix products, remember that they're a copy of the PPG product. So chances are you have to edge prime the matrix epoxy primer, that if you dug deep enough on your PPG sheets, you would see that it's not suitable to go directly over steel, and that you would need to etch that surface first for maximum protection and maximum adhesion. So here we go. I read this sheet that the guy sent me over. I read the substrates. Let me zoom in on that one more time. There you go, substrates. That's what it's supposed to go over. And none of them say metal. So be sure what you're using is made to go over steel. And I'm going to show you a little asterisk. They used to have little asterisk commercials for the phone companies and stuff. Here's the technical data sheet. I didn't mess with any of the information. It's just like it was sent to me. And so there you go. I don't know. Clear that up. Whoever sent that over, if you can find more information on this where it says it's suitable to go over bare steel and doesn't need to be etched first, let me know. You got to remember that the etch is a chemical process that reacts with the steel, and it bonds chemically to the metal. So you can go over a 180 scratch, a 220 scratch, or just bare steel. With epoxy, you always have to put an 80 grit scratch in the steel. 180 to 80 is what they recommend, and 80 is your best insurance because we are dealing with a mechanical scratch. So anyway, thanks for sending this over, and this is how we learn, guys. You know, I'm trying to look out for you guys. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just telling you to check your sheets, and if you're using a product and you have a salesman, you definitely want to get to the bottom of it. And if you have a warranty program in place, more than likely somebody is overlooking if you're not using the etch primer. We used to use the etch primer in all the seams on the quarter panels that we put on. I worked at a shop, and the shop that I worked at was K&J. It was a little mom and pop shop, but we had one of the best reputations in town. Well, you know, I was lucky enough to get a job there and become a team member there, and they had already built their reputation. And when you got a job there, they weren't about to let anybody you know, damage that reputation. So you did it step by step. The owner was a painter, and I found some of his ways a pain in the ass. You know, I was a body man, and I hadn't been a painter in a while. I got out of the paint work and became a body man because the chemicals finally got to me from the volume of cars that I was painting. And I think what I'm going to do is start doing a little series of stuff that can go wrong with painting body stuff. I've worked at some really hack shops, And maybe John Marks can chime in on this. We worked at a shop called Premier Auto Body, and it was probably the worst conditions that you could possibly want. We had two booths that were bolted together. One booth didn't have the fan set up in it, and you could stuff 3 cars in there, and then we put 3 cars outside the booth next to it, and then we'd stuff 3 more cars in the little building next to the paint room there, and then we paint all 9 of those at one time. And you almost always have 1 or 2 cars that mess up, and it was just it was a numbered game there. The owner knew that if you painted 9 or 10 cars, he was going to be able to deliver at least 5 of them, and he'd get you to redo them, and the conditions really didn't matter to him. And we painted in some really bad conditions. I know Johnny ended up on the other side of the street. We had 2 shops, separate sides of the highway, and one shop was just a big outdoor space with a storage shed for everybody's toolbox, and we pump 30-40 rental cars a day out of there. And we do hard hits, frame rails, core supports, quarter panels, door skins, all kinds of repairs. We did all kinds of seam sealer classes. You know, everything's got to match perfect when the rental car goes back to the railhead. So we had some really interesting experiences with rental cars. And back then, a lot of times, you know, the epoxy primer was very critical to make color match. You had to use it as a sealer. GM got into the habit of putting different color epoxies down, and they used them as a sealer. It's never used as a primer at the factory. It's always got an electroplating coating on the metal first, which would be your etch. And then they coat the car with the epoxy as a sealer, because it's a cheap primer sealer. It's cheaper than using a sealer primer, and it's cheaper than using a primer. You know, it's in 55-gallon vats. It's got a hardener in one vat and a, you know, epoxy, and then it mixes in a gun and the nozzle, and it's applied to the car. And when I worked at Ford, we had a lot of delams from the you know, from the epoxy. The paint would just come loose off the epoxy, and then when you get the paint off, the epoxy would be super shiny and super hard looking. And when I got to go to the Ford factory, I found out why that happens. Ford's one of the only companies, well, I don't know if they still do it, but back then they were willing to sacrifice a few losses for the you know, changing the products over. When the line stopped is when you got the adhesion problem with the epoxy, because it's sprayed as a sealer and it's wet on wet, and as long as it's hit wet on wet, it has good adhesion. But if you allow the epoxy to flash off, it loses its tooth, and that's what was happening to those Fords. The base coat was coming delaminating from the epoxy, and it would lift off. And I did hundreds, thousands of those trucks when I worked at Ford, delams. And you know, if you're a painter from back in the 90s, early 90s, late 90s, I think that the epoxy debate is really not a question of debate, because you were in the lion's den doing peels, and every peel job is directly related to the sealer under the base almost 95% of the time. So I do a lot of peelers. I see a lot of bad epoxy primer. You can smell it when it goes bad. You can see the face of it when it's been left sitting too long before they top coat it. It gets real hard and real shiny looking, and the base will just flake off of it. Eventually, it stays laminated for probably 2-3 years, and that's the problem with the epoxy. It seems to have the lifespan. You know, if it's not applied and let it dry, and it's a very slow process, you know. So it just depends on how it's used. It can be misused very easily. And I still have yet to see a technical sheet from a competitor that says that it's direct to metal without a little star or asterisk next to the direct to metal, and then there's footnotes at the bottom of the page. Or like this page where it doesn't say it's ready for direct to metal at all. It says that the substrates are mostly painted surfaces, is what it looked like they wanted there. And they did have a part number for a sealer there, and I bet if you went and looked at it, it would probably be their metal etch sealer. Most companies all have one in place. So little something there. I'm glad that somebody sent the information over, and there was a couple painters that left some very good comments you know, about the epoxy. And a lot of the painters probably that have a bad taste in their mouth are the older painters. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I I'm not spraying water every day, and I'm not spraying the latest and greatest every day. You know, I know there's products out there that come out every day. They're redesigned and reformulated. I just haven't found one yet, and I would really like to find one. You know, I'm not saying that I would use it all the time, because I really have no use for it. The etch and the high build primer works quite well for me. I have no failure, and I have had failure the other way. And even following the instructions, I've had the product fail with a couple different companies. So it hasn't just been a matrix steel. I've had, you know, PPG crap on me. I've had matrix crap on me. I've never had a Diamond primer crap on me. I'll tell you right now, I've never had a Diamond epoxy primer crap on me. None of their products at all. But we're dealing with something that's a super high cost. And they have an etch in place, you know, that comes in the glass bottle. It comes with the primer. And any Diamond shop I've ever worked at, now it's been a while since I've been in a Diamond shop, and like I said, a couple of guys that I really respect on the YouTubes have told me that Diamond have reformulated their epoxy, and it's able to go over bare steel. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. What I do know is my old sales rep, one of my old trainers from RM from Diamond, is a shop owner out here, and he stays up on the product. They use the RM line in his business, so maybe we'll take a little field trip over there. And I'm still friends with Kent Leonard, and he's the Southeast sales rep for Diamond, and he's the guy that trained me, put me through school, and I've had a pretty good relationship with Diamond. They were a big sponsor of a lot of cars that I painted, a lot of funny cars and stuff that I did back in the late 90s. Diamond partnered up with me and sponsored some of those cars. And I've told people in the past that money's no object, and you need some money because it's not cheap. That's probably one of the finest products out there. It's one of the oldest paint lines out there. Glazerith is one of their sister companies, and one of the European shops I used all Glazerith. And if you want the best paint job in the world, I mean, you know, Rudy the Parrot's hard to beat, but it's very expensive. We had a guy from the paint store that was stationed. He came every morning from the paint store and hung out in the material room, because all the materials were so costly that it was all divvied up by a third-party vendor there. We weren't allowed to mix paint, get paint out of the paint room, because if you start making mistakes with Diamond and you have to redo a job, you can be looking at some pretty costly material bills. But anyway, that's a little bit. We'll keep this debate going, and it's a debate. It's not an argument. Remember that. It's we're trying to learn here, and we're trying to get facts. And black and white printed on paper facts is really good for me. I like that kind, and it makes me feel good, because if it's in black and white and it's in paper, you have a warranty in place. But if you just assume and you listen to people's bad advice, sometimes when the shit hits the fan, you'll find yourself that you don't have a warranty. And I found myself in that situation. It's very uncomfortable, and I don't ever want anybody to be in that situation. So that's why I try to get the book out and go by the book and show you step by step. Like I said, I've got the Honda just about taped up out here. I'm going to upload this video. We'll go out there and we'll throw some etch down, and I'll show you the book, the little asterisks and all the little hidden agendas, and we'll get to the bottom of it.